What's going on, everybody, and welcome to a brand new series on the Smite Game YouTube channel. My name is Trendkill, and this is Know Your Enemy. Now, before we get into the video, I want to make a note that this intro is going to be a lot longer than they're going to be in future videos, but I wanted to make sure I clarified a few things. First things first, this is a beginner video, so if you're experienced, if you're level 30 and you got 1,000 games under your belt, this is not the video series for you. We're going to be focusing on players from like level 1 to 10 or 15, so if you're beyond that or you think you know enough about the game where a beginner guide may not help you, then go ahead and click out now. But if you still want to stick around and listen, then let's talk about the series. So a little backstory, I've introduced several of my personal friends to Smite, and every time I've tried to help them get into it, I've noticed they're lacking one basic piece of knowledge, and that is they have no clue what the other gods in the game do. They focused on one specific god because they found out, hey, I like this god, and they stuck to that god, so they don't learn anything else about any of the other gods. But what this does is, unfortunately, it puts them at a disadvantage because they don't know what the other gods are capable of. So they have no clue when to initiate a fight or when to run away. And this series is supposed to shed light on those gods so that you know what they're capable of without having to go through and play every god multiple times. Did Neith just use her backflip? She's probably vulnerable. Is Athena's taunt on cooldown? That means she's got no more crowd control. And we're gonna talk about several other things that may lead into you thinking outside of the box when it comes to fighting the enemy team. Now, another bonus to this video is that yes, I'm giving you information on how to play against a god, but that doesn't mean that you can't reverse that information and use it to your advantage. Maybe the enemy team hasn't watched this video, and in that case, you have the upper hand. Alright, so now you guys know a little bit about the series, you know what to expect from future episodes, but I want to make sure you know a few basic things first. Over here you're going to find a link to a playlist. It's going to show you a few beginner guides that I've created. Those are going to explain the very basic core mechanics of the game, and they're going to define some terms that I may use in these videos that you may not understand unless you watch these first. So either have a firm grasp of basic MOBA terminology, or go watch these beginner guides and get caught up. The second thing I want to make sure you're doing is that in addition to watching these videos, please go back and read the god's abilities as well. These videos are going to assume that you at least know the basic information about the god's kits. Cooldown times, damages, do the abilities fire in a straight line or are they ground targeted AoE abilities? In this series, we're going to talk about the advanced feature of the abilities and the importance of those features in relation to the god's kit. But I don't have time to talk about all of the basic information. These are supposed to be short videos. So finally, I say they're supposed to be short videos, and here we are with like a 3-minute intro, but we're ready to get into the video that you guys came here to watch. Are you ready to know your enemy? Today we're going to be talking about Neith, the Weaver of Fate. Alright, so let's go ahead and dive right in. The first thing you're going to see in each of these videos is a quick visual representation of what each god is good at. So let's start at the top and we'll go around clockwise and kind of give a brief definition of each of these categories. Damage is obviously how much damage that god is capable of doing. Mobility is going to show you how easy it's going to be for that god to get into team fights or get out of them if they're in trouble, and also their ability to get around the map quickly. Utility is going to show you how many things that god can do in just 4 abilities. So if a god has several status effects they can apply on each of their abilities, they're going to have a high utility. Defense is obviously going to show you how well they defend against attacks. Healing like damage is very straightforward. This is the amount of healing potential this god's going to have. You can see Neith's kind of floating around the middle of the graph. That's because she only has a self-heal. Somebody who can heal not only themselves but also the rest of their team is going to be much higher in this category. And finally, control is going to show you how well a god can crowd control their enemies. So the purpose of this graph is to really give you a quick visual representation of what the god's good at, so you can glance right now and see that Neith is a much more controlling and utility-based hunter than she is a god who's going to come in and just blow your face off with damage. Alright, so now that we know what Neith's good at, let's take a look at some of the more intricate details of her kit. And maybe not intricate details, but some of the things that you may not have understood or may have missed the first time you read her abilities descriptions. The first thing you need to understand about Neith is that her kit is built around her passive called Broken Weave. Essentially, every time an enemy god dies or Neith uses her backflip, a weave is placed on the ground in that location. Those weaves then interact with her first and second abilities and add secondary effects to those abilities. So for instance, her first ability is called Spirit Arrow. It is a straight shot projectile ability that damages and roots everything that it goes through. But when you shoot your spirit arrow through a broken weave, that broken weave detonates and explodes in a much larger area of effect. Not only that, but the damage that the spirit arrow would have normally done is then doubled. So you can see by integrating a broken weave into that ability, it drastically changes what that ability does. The other ability that interacts with Neith's weaves is her second ability called Unravel. This is an AoE ground-targeted ability that damages all enemies in the AoE and also heals Neith from up to 3 targets that were caught in the ability. Now, I wanted to make sure we talked about this one because this ability in particular does several things that you may have missed your first time reading through its description. For starters, a lot of people may not know that this ability debuffs the attack speed of all enemies hit by 30%. Also, this ability will heal from weaves that are in the same area for double what you heal from an enemy. And in addition to that, it adds to the total of how many things you can heal from. So in a scenario where there are 2 weaves on the ground and there's an enemy wave coming towards those weaves, Neith can use her Unravel on that entire wave, damaging the whole wave, healing from 3 of the minions, and in addition to the minions, healing from 2 broken weaves. Now, one last thing about weaves, if you are playing Neith, your weaves show up on the ground as a small blue circle. If the enemy team has a Neith, her weaves will show up on the ground as a small red circle, which will help you always be cognizant of which weaves are in play when you're fighting an enemy Neith. So when it comes to knowing your enemy, remember that Neith has a ton of tools in her kit that she can use to her advantage. In just 4 abilities, she has a root, a heal, an attack speed debuff, a slow, all of the weaves that are in play, and a global ultimate. So if played properly, Neith can be a very formidable foe. Alright, so in the mechanics section, what we're going to be doing is looking at things that you're going to want to watch out for as you're playing against an enemy Neith. These are more advanced tactics or things that are not inherently obvious by reading the descriptions of the abilities. Also, remember that these mechanics and tips can be reversed and used to your advantage if you happen to be the one playing Neith. Alright, so the first tip I've got is about Spirit Arrow. Remember that this ability can be fired through walls. This is not obvious based on reading the description. So remember, if you're low on life or you happen to be running for your life, you're not safe if you're separated from Neith by a wall because she can still shoot through that wall and either kill you or root you to give her more time to get around that obstacle. Another thing we need to be watching out for is her ability to shoot her broken weaves with her Spirit Arrow. Remember, those explode in a large AoE, so you need to always be aware of how large or approximately how large those AoE explosions are. If you're trying to take advantage of an enemy Neith's poor positioning, she's instinctually gonna backflip. Well, remember, the backflip lays a weave on the ground. She can shoot that weave and root both you and your support, as well as dealing double the damage that she would have done had you not been standing in that AoE. So always remember what causes weaves to be created and what Neith can do to those weaves so you don't get caught off guard. Alright, so let's move on and talk about Unravel. This one ability, let's say you happen to be boxing an enemy Neith, which is essentially fighting her 1v1. If you guys are both similar farm, similar level, similar experience with the god, odds are either one of you could win. However, if she uses her Unravel on you, that will debuff your attack speed, damage you, and heal her. That one ability can greatly turn the tide of battle if you had not prepared for those things to happen. So always remember what that ability can actually do to you. Another thing that people don't necessarily think about when it comes to the heal part of her Unravel is that if you happen to be chasing an enemy Neith through the jungle, she can use her Unravel on a jungle camp from outside of the aggro range of that camp to heal from it without taking the risk of taking damage from the camp itself. So that can really turn the tides of a chase through the jungle. Alright, now let's move on to her third ability, Backflip. This is an extremely versatile ability in the fact that it does several different things for her. Now, we've already discussed this, so I'm going to touch on it extremely briefly. Remember, when she backflips, she places a weave on the ground. That weave can then be used to extremely quickly clear a wave of minions, so she's got some pretty decent wave clear. Now, in addition to that, remember, it is still an AoE explosion that can damage and root you, so you've got to be very careful around Neith when she's clearing a wave. Another thing is that when she is in the air using her backflip, she is completely immune to damage, so it is a way to get her out of problematic situations. So don't be surprised if you throw everything that you've got at a Neith and she simply backflips out of it completely unscathed. The last few tips I have for you are about her ultimate called World Weaver. First off, a couple of things that are not mentioned in the description. One, Neith has to have mini-map vision of an enemy to be able to lock onto them. Now, this vision can be supplied by minions, or towers, or wards, or teammates, anything that will highlight Neith on the minimap. So if you're playing against a Neith and you happen to be low on life and you're anticipating her to shoot you from across the map with World Weaver, then make sure you get away from anything that could potentially highlight you on the map. Run away from towers and enemy minions and any place where you think they may have wards. Try not to stand by the enemy team. Another thing is that if you are targeted, you and everybody else in the game will be able to see that you're targeted and will be able to see from which direction the World Weaver is coming. Another thing that is not mentioned in the description is that just because Neith has locked onto you does not mean that you are guaranteed to be hit by that arrow. Your support can stand in between you and where the arrow is coming from and intercept the damage and the stun for you. The same goes for if you are playing a support. You want to be always aware that Neith has the ability to shoot your team and always be prepared to intercept that damage. The last thing that you want to worry about, and this is in the description, but it's still worth mentioning, is that Neith does not have to charge her ultimate to the full charge to be able to get a stun on you. It will do reduced damage and a shorter stun time, but that short stun time may be just enough for Neith's team to catch up to you and finish you off. So if you are at low life or you are in a fight and you are on the minimap, you are in no way safe at any time if the enemy team has a Neith. So there you have it, guys. Hopefully I've not wasted too much of your time. You've learned a lot about Neith, and now you feel a little more comfortable fighting her on the battleground of the gods. So thanks for watching, guys. Again, my name is Trendkill, and I will see you next week on Know Your Enemy when we talk about Ymir, the father of the Frost Giants.